Hi everybody, welcome to this session. Today I am delighted to welcome Paddy from Texthelp, who is going to be talking to us about the products that they have available to support students, both in exams but also throughout their day-to-day life in school to ensure that they can meet the curriculum alongside their peers. So let's bring Paddy up on the screen, Jay. Somewhere. There we go. Hi Paddy.
Hey Abigail, how are we today?
Not too bad, thank you. Not too bad at all. At least it's stopped raining and it's got above 2 degrees because it was freezing this morning.
That
Very
is a
cold.
small plus in our lives.
Definitely. So, have you got a presentation for us to tell us all about Texthelp's products?
I have indeed, and of course it always comes with a health warning with me, Abigail. Just talk a little bit about textile products when you know how enthusiastic I am about what it is we do and how we help everybody. So thanks for a bit of an introduction. And are you happy enough for me just to share my screen and we
We're
can
happy for you to go ahead. Let's see what happens.
brilliant. Let's get some stuff up on screen here. Let's go. Now, I'm told in true sensible SENCO style, you will not be able to see my lovely face throughout this part, but hopefully, Abigail and Gavin, you can get this wonderful 50-year-old face back on the screen later on in the session. So, really happy to be here as always to work with Abigail and Gavin and the team. And I just want to take a few minutes, maybe 20 or so minutes of your time and run through a couple of the products that we here have in Texthelp. And actually, Abigail in the introduction said something really interesting. You know, I'm here and I want to talk mostly about exams and how we help pupils within exams. But the reality is that if we are to help pupils in exams, we need to make sure that it is indeed, as Abigail's alluded to, their normal way of working. And so the tools that I'll go through, whilst we'll be talking about it from an exams perspective, we want to make sure that those tools and those supports are available across the entire school year. Because there's nothing worse than a pupil with any individual need or requiring any additional access arrangements or support not having access to those tools and having a knock in confidence when they sit in that exam hall and are being presented with some new tools to give them access to. So most people know a little bit about Texthelp. I hope at this stage, if you don't, I do want you to know that our mission is quite simple: education for everyone. That's what we believe in, and we talk about inclusion, I suppose, in the widest possible terms. We want to make sure that the tools that we do from a digital perspective are helping every single young person that's in every single one of your classes and that you might support. And so, really, it's whether we know about their individual needs, whether we have assessed for a particular need area, or whether they're just struggling on a day-to-day basis in the classroom. We want to know that our tools are helping every single pupil and student that we put them in front of. So let's get on a little bit. And I want to really focus on exams today. The season is upon us, or it's almost upon us. And now is really for me the time that a lot of people have been thinking about exams and what it looks like to provide access arrangements. So we're used to our 25% extra time. We're used to starting to think about things like scribes and human readers and planning for this. Hopefully, at this stage, we've all filled in our access arrangements AAO online and we are all set for what we need to do for our pupils. But what I really want to do is look at outside of those things, where can a computer help with that? Where can a digital device help with that? What help can it be to you and what help can it be to your students and pupils? And at Texthelp, we have like four really core tools. Some of you may well have heard of and know of Read&Write. And this is a simple toolbar that really helps with literacy support. So things like text to speech and speech to text, but also developing vocabulary and sentence construction and translation and every area of need or literacy development we try and help with Read&Write. And EquatIO is to do the same with maths, and OrbitNote we do the same features in Read&Write, but we do that in PDFs. So we don't just limit all of this literacy work within web pages or Google Docs or Microsoft Word documents. We make sure that it's there for worksheets and booklets that you may have created as well and are available in class. One thing you may not know is Clara Read, another massively popular literacy toolbar, which also has an exam mode, is part of our product portfolio as well. So lots of those tools that you will have seen are there both in the classroom and in exam hall. But let's focus on exams for today. Abigail has done more than a brilliant introduction to me, but Paddy McGrath and I'm head of education here at Texthelp. I'm sure both Gavin and Abigail make sure you have our details after this, but by all means, of course, reach out any questions, we'll try our best to help. I want to think about stats when it comes to exams. I'm going to very quickly go through these. 556,000 pupils in UK schools qualify for additional access arrangements. Nearly 22% of those are really revolving around speech and language. And what we've found in our studies is that in the vast majority of secondary level schools that we work with in exams, you could be up to 40 different individual pupils who need access to a reader or scribe or both. And of course, traditionally that's been done by human, but there's a lot of time involved in that. And if you think about the average number of hours that a pupil might sit GCSE, talking about maybe up to 30 for a typical student taking a standardized and average number of GCSE. So there's a real cost in bringing individuals into a school and getting them onboarded, getting them trained in line with JCQ guidelines and requirements, and making sure that they're ready and set to support your students, not to mention the logistics part of rooms and all sorts of other things. So that's a bit of a challenge. So if you think about what Abigail talked about at the start, that normal way of working part, that's always fundamental to what we talk about with the products and how they lean into exams. Normal way of working is key when it comes to exams. And JCQ, who we'll come to in a little second, hopefully we'll explore a little bit more in the Q&A, are particularly focused on ensuring that the access arrangements in an exam are normal way of working throughout the year. So when you think about a computer reader or a scribe, a dictation piece of software, it needs to be what pupils are working with throughout the year. But we also need to think about the challenges of building confidence within an exam. We need them to have access to the normal way of working so they know how to use it. But we also need to not negatively impact their confidence by perhaps giving them a normal way of working, say a text-to-speech bit of software, then getting them into the exam hall and saying, well, this is Mrs. McGrath, and Mrs. McGrath is now going to be your reader for the day, and how that might negatively impact their confidence. It's different, but also it's a challenge to ask somebody to repeat things all the time, whereas you can click a mouse button as often as possible. We also know from those stats that there's an increasing number of students with access arrangements, and maybe it's a bit inconsistent in terms of how we can use support throughout the school and academic year and how we use it in exams. And so if we think about the challenges that computer readers and scribes might start to help solve, the availability of human readers, with that rise in the number of students who actually require access arrangements, particularly when it comes to readers and scribes, it's actually getting the staff in place to do that. We can only pull so many teaching assistants into that doesn't distract them from their duty. And also, it's hard to get people onboarded and trained. So the actual sheer number, the budget, the cost of that is a challenge. Student pushback on that as well, unless they've had a reader and scribe with them throughout the year as their normal way of working, why would they suddenly want to change to that when they get to an exam hall? And of course, with a human reader, we have an exclusion over GCSE English. So we want to make sure that whatever access arrangements and computer tools that we put in place are there across the board. And JCQ, who will highlight in just a couple of slides related to the products, of course, do actively encourage the use of technology. In fact, they advocate for an increase in the use of technology to a much greater extent instead of human readers and scribes. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And this includes readers, it includes reading pens, recognition technology, word processors for typing. They think about independence within that, but they also think about preparation as your students and pupils move through into higher levels of education or employment. So it's quite clear that from JCQ, our governing body for exams guidance, that they're keen to let all of us as SENCOs, exams officers, admins, IT technicians, explore and utilize these tools. And if you're thinking about what exams can a computer reader be used in? Well, we're all used to our high stakes GCSE and A levels, and of course they can be used there. But did you know they can also be used in Key Stage 2 and SATs? They can be used on IB exams and across all of the exams bodies. So whether you're using Pearson or AQA or CCEA or you're using Welsh exam boards, because they come under that JCQ guidance, and because many of the other assessment bodies that fall under JCQ guidance and adhere to it, even though they're not part of the membership. It means that these same things that we're going to talk about apply across a multitude of different examination areas. So it doesn't matter what age the child is, it doesn't necessarily matter what level they are studying to. So whether they're in primary, whether they're in secondary, whether they're in college doing resets, or moving up through more vocational qualifications, computer readers and scribes through dictation software can be used there. So let's go through a few things here. So let's frame the technology and then go, right, well, how might these be used? So we talk about computer assistance in an exam for access arrangements broadly in three ways. Number one is a computer reader, the ability to have customizable text to speech just to play things out loud. But not only the words on a page, the words that might be in a diagram, the words that might be in another section of the page that maybe haven't been made accessible. Also, that applies when it comes to thinking about a reader to things like masking. So if your pupils and students have been used to, for example, a screen overlay to provide an overlay to help them in that reading piece, you can also have that within the context of a computer reader. So that's step one. Step two is speech recognition. Some people call it speech recognition, some people call it dictation, but really that's the piece of technology that's going to be in place of a scribe. And the important thing nowadays is it used to be we used to have to sit our pupils down and train them for 20 minutes reading specific sentences out and repeating things to try and get good dictation. The advantage now is dictation is so good that whether you've got my accent, Abigail's, Gavin's, or any of you listening today, it will start to pick on up on that very quickly and very easily. So we don't have to train it. Just nice and accurate under exams. And then the last one really there is the maths reader, because we're all used to computer reader and thinking about text to speech. And there are situations and case examples for certain students that we can actually have guidance from JCQ that permit us to use a reader for maths. And what all of this comes down to is that this must be their normal way of working. So we want to make sure that the tools they have throughout the year, so access to text to speech, are available in the exams. If they're used to and require a maths reader to help them understand maths notation or written down numbers on a page, then they should have that within the exam hall. If they're used to having somebody write for them or use dictation technology throughout the year, it needs to be in the exam hall. And that's really where our products come into this. So we'll very quickly run through just three quick products and we'll let you have a look at the types of features that they have. Now, what you've got on screen is Read&Write. So this is what we're probably best known for at Texthelp. Read&Write has a huge amount of features, 26 different features. So it'll help pupils with sentence construction because it'll provide word prediction. It'll provide dictionary access so they can look up a word and get a spoken dictionary. It'll provide the widget symbol library for a word that they might want to examine a little bit more closely and give them a picture reference. It'll also give them the ability to have a screen mask, to have dictation, to translate a single word. So if English isn't their first language, but they're studying through the medium of English, then get one word translated to their mother tongue to help them out. But also things like highlighters to highlight or summarize pieces of text on a screen. Vocabulary tools to let a pupil or a teacher select individual, perhaps new words or more complex words of vocabulary and have those created in a Word topic page. So on Read&Write that we would use throughout the year, we've got all of these features, a vast range of features that are going to help with literacy, with accessibility, with reading, with writing, with simplification of web pages, of reducing the complexity of text, all there throughout the year on one toolbar that just sits right on top of the document or digital environment that they're in. So if they're in a Word document, a Google document, if they're in a PDF, if they're on a web page, they've got access to all these tools to really help them with literacy. And the question, of course, is when we're using that throughout the year and when we get to exams, what are we actually permitted to use? So what we do is we put this into a simple exam mode. So this is set up just one time at the start of the examination. And what we do is instead of giving them 26 different tools, we give them the tools that JCQ permit under their guidelines. So text to speech, and depending on their individual need or their access arrangements, We also give them what we call talk and type or dictation, the ability to write with your voice. We give them screenshot reader, which is a different way to access text on a page, perhaps in a diagram or on a graph, or words that are not standard in line. And lastly, we give them screen mask, the ability to select a color overlay that can help them with the words on a page. So what we do is we ask you to request a PDF copy of the examination paper, and you can do that from all of the exam bodies. Some of them supply those as standard now within your exams portal. It's opened on a machine or device, and automatically then Read and Write is in exam mode. And now your pupils and students, your candidates, have access to the paper in front of them on a computer. They're only provided access to the tools that they're allowed. In this case, for example, the student qualifies for dictation in order to write their answers, and also text to speech in order to listen to the words on the paper. So it's secure and it's tight and it protects the integrity of the exam. And that's what's important when we come to our JCQ considerations. So as a computer reader, only the approved features will be there. And pupils can't get access to anything else. They can't get access to the internet. This can work completely offline. And this allows them to change, say, the speed of the voice or the type of the voice. It enables them to replicate what they do throughout the rest of the year. How do they use text to speech? So it's secure because only these approved features are there, and it's secure because it's offline. And of course, therefore, it heeds to and conforms to the JCQ guidelines. And of course, JCQ are very clear about this. A computer reader is an acceptable arrangement since it allows the candidate to independently meet the requirements of the reading standard. And we always refer on text within Texthelp to the JCQ guidelines and make sure that we always conform to these. So we'll give you advice here. And of course, we've got another special guest star on the deck today, which is Abigail, her very self. And Abigail, thinking through, I always ask Abigail, what's her advice to SENCOs when it comes to that? And Abigail's advice is simple and on the screen here. A computer reader provides independence. We've seen that before. It reduces the demand on staffing. We talked about that. And she's also commented on cost because, of course, there's an outlay with something like Read and Write, because whilst there might be that initial outlay of money and cost, it works out cheaper in the long run. I know Abigail and the team there are very pro computer readers in terms of what they've seen the impact is with students, on the condition and caveat that it's a pupil's normal way of working. So if we think about this dedicated exam mode that Read and Write goes into, that can be in the power of your IT admin or the power of your exams officer. It's recommended by you as a SENCO, but this is per pupil. So when you're in an exam hall, this is not the case that every pupil get access to dictation, every pupil get access to text to speech. This is set per pupil. So it's dedicated to the individual pupil, and it stays there for the duration of the exam. And then it goes back to that big toolbar that you saw earlier with all the features that they use in their normal way of working. And it's actually really, really easy to set up. We can very simply, as you can see on screen, open up a standard PDF paper that we've requested through AAO. And once we've done that in an examination environment, of course, you can see we can have this read aloud. But what you'll also see is the toolbar at the top of the page has all the features that they would use throughout the academic year. So what we need to do is put this into an examination mode. And it's very straightforward to do this. We have an individual password. And once we've set it in, we flip it into exam mode. We set the features off that the pupil doesn't actually meet the standard for. So we'll leave on just the things that we need. And now we have a secure lockdown mode. The pupil can only change the speed of the voice and how the voice is read and the type of the voice they have. It's secure. It's now working offline. It only has the features. And of course, therefore, it meets JCQ guidelines. So in terms of actually getting that up and running, very straightforward when you have the software. So of course, as I've said, meets JCQ guidelines. You'll need to complete a Form 9. You didn't used to do this. You used to have to only request evidence, but you'll need to complete a Form 9. And there's a few changes here depending on whether your pupil needs just a reader or they need a reader and a scribe as well. Slightly different form setup, but this is easy to set up and manage. We'll scan the exam papers as we go through to make sure they're accurate and they're read aloud correctly. The pupil will have full control of the speed and the voices. And we can add some additional features on here per pupil level. So if a pupil is used to having, say, Read and Write or Clara Read throughout the year, and they use highlighters because it helps them highlight key passages or it helps them summarize pieces on the page, they are permitted to have that in the exam hall. And this, of course, then is secure. But I would just come back to something again Abigail said at the start. It's always the case that this should be a normal way of working throughout the year. And so you've saw Read and Write. You may also be familiar with a tool called Clara Read. So now you've seen the fundamentals of it. It's much the same in Clara Read. If you use Clara Read to help literacy support and help your pupils with reading and writing within the classroom, it'll be no surprise that Clara Read does indeed have an exam mode as well. So Clara Read squeezes itself all the way down in its exam mode, and it just gives pupils very similar abilities to be able to play text aloud or to be able to dictate. The same process applies. It goes into admin mode. You can scan the paper, and the paper is then there present. And why did I show you this instead of Read and Write? Because sometimes some pupils just prefer one or the other. We want to give them access to both, and they're purchased and deployed in exactly the same way. So it's really a choice of what your school uses and what your student prefers as you go. And so let's think about speech recognition. So we talked about computer reader, so how we load a PDF up, how we have it read aloud, how that supports your pupil instead of a human. We can also support them with speech recognition. So using dictation, we call it talk and type internally here at Texthelp. And you can do that through Read and Write. You can do that through Clara Read, and you can do it through some of the other tools that we'll see. But with that, it's just back down to that dedicated exam mode. The feature is enabled per pupil in exactly the same way. And JCQ are very straightforward and direct about who actually is permitted to use this. This has to be appropriate to their needs throughout the academic year. It has to be their normal way of working. So if you have approval for a scribe, you're able to use speech recognition technology. And it's the alternative to a human, and it's the alternative to a human making notes. But it doesn't require any guidance. It doesn't require any training. It can be used across all types of exams. And so that means that when they speak, it simply pops that into a word processor that you use on the examination tool. Very straightforward to use. In exam mode, a student just presses the talk and type button and they'll literally talk into the microphone. We've all seen this. We all do it on our mobile phones or on our desktop devices. But they can do this with an examination header and footer document in something like WordPad. It means they can keep it offline, they can keep it secure. And that means that that one computer is now not only their computer reader, if they qualify, but also their computer writer, their speech recognition tool. Really easy to use and doesn't need trained. That's a little bit different. That'll require a Formate or Formate RF, depending on your pupil situation. And if you are applying for both, you'll put them both in that Formate. You won't need the separate Form 9 for a computer reader. That's really easy to set up and manage in exactly the same way. It's just a quick flick of the switch in admin mode, and your pupils have access to the right tools right there and then. And just very quickly, and then we'll start to wrap up. We talked about computer reader for maths, and the computer reader for maths is a very interesting thing because we've left maths kind of to one side for accessibility. I don't personally think we all do enough for accessibility on maths. I also think that we can't leave the examination hall behind when it comes to maths as well, but there are a number of additional rules that govern when you can use a reader in maths. And we use this exam mode in a tool called EquatIO. Don't worry about the name at this point in time. But what EquatIO lets any pupil do is click maths on an examination paper, a physics paper, chemistry paper, mathematics, higher mathematics paper. Doesn't matter the complexity. They can click it and they can have that read aloud. And exactly the same as the text reader you saw earlier, they can have access to changing the voice, changing the speed of the voice, and how they listen to it back. So no matter what level of maths, we simply give them the ability to listen to the maths aloud. And we also have a decode toggle within there because the guidance around decoding for maths is that we should point or simply express the symbol and not explain what the symbol or the type of maths notation is. And so we can turn that mode on. So actually we'll just get raw numbers read aloud. And I would say that in terms of qualification, this is not something that just gets turned on for exam period. This is something that must be the normal way of working for that pupil throughout the year. It absolutely fundamentally has to be, and that's the key requirement within here. So you'll have to examine your pupil and how your pupil might use that. And if they qualify, they can have access to this particular mode. It's really easy to use. So in conjunction with something like Read and Write that you'll see at the top of the screen, it's just a case of drawing over the maths as you can see on the screen, and it'll read the text around the maths and also the maths content on the screen. So if you think about it, people with dyslexia, we commonly think about how can we get the words, how can we help them comprehend the words without having to focus on the decoding? And that's where a computer reader, of course, will come in an exam. But maths is exactly the same for dyslexic. It's exactly the same challenges. And so we need to have that read aloud. And so if we just move then through and think about these, simple administration again, it's secure, it's compliant, it's JCQ approved within that, and it must be the normal way of working. And it's very clear here on the guidance on screen, and there's some supplementaries from JCQ that clarify the decoding piece that we talked about earlier. And so really easy to use on EquatIO. And if you take those two things combined as products, you've got couple of products there that are going to work throughout the year to help develop literacy and maths for all of your pupils. But also then in examination mode, you've got a total reading solution for all types of exams. So all subjects and all platforms. Now, if I think about the last point that I just wanted to bring up before we bring Abigail back here, a big question that we have, and this has happened, I suppose, post the pandemic, where lots of Chromebooks were bought by lots of schools. The common thinking is, oh, we've got Chromebooks, we can't use a computer reader because we need to do it on a Windows device. That's actually not true anymore because we've got a tool called OrbitNote. And it supports students with computer reader, with word processing, with dictation, and it supports them exclusively on Chromebooks. So if your school has Chromebooks, you want to use those within an exam context, of course, you can use this tool, OrbitNote. And that complies fully with normal way of working and the new requirements in and around JCQ and its ability to access the internet for services. Not access the internet for information, but access it for services. So this should be the normal way of working. And on a Chromebook, that's great because actually pupils have their Chromebooks. They use them throughout the year. They need and will have access to accessibility tools like Read and Write that you saw, like ClaraRead, like EquatIO for maths. And this gives them the ability to use those same features within a Chromebook. And so we call this OrbitNote. And that is our Chromebook solution for accessibility, but also now extends to exams. And it's really, really easy to use because if you're a Google school and you're using Chromebooks, you're probably using things like Google Classroom. And that means that you can assign a paper directly to a Chromebook. You can tell the Chromebook in advance who the pupil is that's using it and what access arrangements they are permitted to use. So it's just like any other tool. It provides independence. It reduces the need for human readers and scribes. It uses the tools that you have already in your class. And it's still that normal way of working piece. Because if students are using Read and Write with all those fabulous supports, the prediction and the word banks and the dictionaries, the picture references, the audiobooks, the screen mask, all of those things are available on the Chromebook within this OrbitNote piece. And so what do? Same as we do on any other platform, we make an exam mode version of OrbitNote. So all that's required for you is to press a button, move it into exam mode, and pupils have access to only the tools they would be permitted as part of their access arrangements, but also the JCQ would allow. And you can see there on screen, text to speech, the ability to hover, the ability to capture words and have them read aloud from images and diagrams and graphs, the ability to highlight. You'll also see a new button there, which is the button T, the letter T. That means they can type right on top of interactive exam papers. So not only are we ready now to support our pupils with access arrangements, we're ready in the future as we go. And you'll find one other really nice feature on this, and it's called turning on the far right hand side. That allows a pupil, when they're finished the exam, to just return it right back to base, and you can print them all out collectively. So it's not a case of having to collect papers that have been completed from each individual device. And it works really, really straightforward. So all of the tools that you might need are crammed right into that one small toolbar that just sit there. A computer reader, a screen mask, a dictation tool, all selectable dependent on the access arrangements that that pupil has actually qualified for. And in word processing, we do some really nice things you'll be used to. If you're thinking about a computer reader or you've used it and your student also qualifies for word processing capability, normally there's a separate screen opens for that in something like WordPad. We bring this all together on Chromebook so they can have one tab open, and that's their computer reader reading the exam paper back. We have another tab open, and that is their answer booklet and their ability to type into that. And also we can do things like switch on spell check, switch off spell check, again, depending on the access arrangements that a pupil has qualified for. And this extends right the way through to just tapping in and keying in things like candidate numbers, automatically populating the headers and footers of that PDF sheet to make sure that it's fully compliant with JCQ. And last but not least, it would be remiss of me not to put this forward, because lots of people ask this. And lots of people say, yeah, we're an iPad school. Does this mean that our pupils have to access things as a computer reader on a desktop device? Well, we wouldn't want them doing that, and here's why. Because if their normal way of working is to use an iPad throughout the academic year, and that's where their support is, we believe that their support for normal way of working should be an iPad in the examination hall. And we're very fortunate in Texthelp to have our Claro PDF tool, which is fully compliant with JCQ guidelines, and that's a PDF computer reader for exams access arrangements. So the same thing applies. We request the PDF copy of the paper. We get it on the morning of the exam, and we now have it on our iPad, as you can see in front of us. And now what we can have access to is the ability to simply tap any text on the page that you see in front of you, tap it and have it read aloud. It doesn't allow pupils access to anything else on an iPad. It can work completely offline, so there's no Wi-Fi needed. It's fully JCQ compliant, and it works through almost every version of iOS from version 8. And that just means even if you've got old iPads lying around and not brand lovely new ones, it'll still work there. So if you have an old bank of iPads and you want to use those as your computer reader solution, because that's what your school uses, you can simply install this one app directly on top of those iPads, and you'll have a secure JCQ compliant computer reader for exams. And that's really it from me. I told you at the start I'd be 20 minutes. I realize I'm now just over 30, so I haven't been too bad. But I will share my details on the screen here, and do absolutely reach out. There's a link just on the screen there. If you want to have a look and watch some videos on the exam modes in action and how they relate to the normal way of working throughout the year, just hit that link, text.help/exam solutions. We link into the JCQ compliance pieces. We have a brilliant JCQ Bible that can help you set up your computers or your iPads within exams, and also provision those and make sure you're hitting the deadlines for exams and access arrangements. And there's another thing there that's downloadable for there, which is a really good resource actually. And a question that we get all the time, and I'm sure Abigail you get all the time, is right, I'm using a computer reader. I now have to get a PDF copy of the examination paper. What boards can give me that, and how do I request it? And so this is a really nice, almost a cheat sheet at this point in time, that lets you actually analyze for each individual board where you can get that paper from, at what time of the day you get that paper from, and what you need to do to fill in the guidelines. So remember, there's three parts I should say. The first part is you need to have our software. That goes without saying. The second part is you need to make sure that you're compliant with access arrangements online and the forms are filled in for approval for each candidate. And lastly, you need to make sure that you understand how we actually request the PDF copy of the examination paper, when you get it, and how you're going to get it onto the device. Sounds a lot of work. It's actually very straightforward. And think about it in this context. How much work is there in getting human readers and scribes in getting them trained, in getting them in front of your students, in creating familiarity, in collecting the papers, all of those things. Just 3 steps can get you well on the way to providing access arrangements that are really, really impactful and helpful for each of your pupils. And with that, I think we can pop right back to you, Abigail, at this point in time. If Gavin wants to press his magic button.
That was really enjoyable. Thank you, Paddy. And it was nice to see those different products coming together and how they can support our students. For me, it was quite interesting to watch the OrbitNote one, because I know that you've had it for a while, but I've not actually seen that one in action quite so much. So it was definitely useful to see.
It's really different for us, actually, Abigail, because one thing we found was that when people were starting to use Chromebooks, they wanted to be conscious that obviously they were secure. And we went through a lot of loops in making sure that was the case. But secondly, they kind of wanted this all in one, because one thing that happens with a computer reader is you tend to use then WordPad or a third-party tool like ExamTech, and that's all well and good. That's great. But when people were looking at Chromebooks, they went, right, well, how can we make this a little bit easier on me? I want to assign the examination paper. I want to give them their access arrangements, but I want to get it back all in one place and not have multiple tools. So it makes life a whole lot easier, for sure.
I thought it was really interesting, actually, you giving a breakdown of the evidence that's needed for the different things. Just to say that if a student has an EHCP, we're going to use Form 9, not Form 8, because I think your thing said Form 8. And if they have got ADHD or autism, they've got a diagnosis, or they've got a physical need, generally speaking, that is also Form 9 as opposed to Form 8, even without an EHCP. So, but I'm going to just put a caveat with that. JCQ change their arrangements every August, so if you're watching this after August 2024, it may well have changed again. We're on Form 37. Well, I was going to ask you a question. So you said we can use this for Key Stage 2 SATs. Is that across all of the papers in Key Stage 2 SATs?
It is, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so even the English paper, the reading side of that.
Yep, it is. The caveat, so Key Stage 2 SATs are incredibly clear about use of technology in there. It must be evidence that it's used throughout the year. This cannot be we're going to use it at examination time. In fact, they're heavier in that even sometimes, I think, than GCSE and A-level at times, in terms of how because they state it quite categorically that if it's proven that they don't use it, it has a negative impact on the standardization of the exam. So absolutely, but it has to be normal way of working.
Brilliant. So, because I was always under the impression that you couldn't use it in the English reading papers for SATs, but if you can, amazing. That's brilliant. That's really good news.
Yeah.
Excellent. And the question we always get asked is, how much do these things cost, Paddy? Now, we're assuming they've got laptops and Chromebooks or whatever in school, so we're not going to put that cost in. Talk to us about kind of costs for this.
We, I think I was almost going to start with a politician's answer there and avoid that, and it's not where I was going at all. But what I was going to say was that I think we're all used to, in the segment and where we work, we're all used to kind of quite an expensive piece of software per individual student. And there's nothing wrong with that, because of course it's specially designed software. And we used to be that company where we put a lot of effort into a few individual pupils, and therefore the cost was prorated. So, you can buy a single copy of Read&Write for one student for £150 for the year. So you can do that. But actually, pretty much all of our schools that use it, they buy a domain license, which means everybody has access. And that can vary. If you're in a primary school, that could be as low as £500 a year. It could be, for a large secondary, that could be £2,500 per year. But if you compare that to, obviously we've done this calculation before, Abigail, but compare that to human readers and scribes. But sometimes I prefer almost not to do that, because I prefer to think, right, what about all the pupils that you're not able to get to and not able to help? And you're giving them all access to this. What about pupils that aren't wanting to use stuff because of stigma, but they'll use it because everybody else is using it? What's the other pieces of support? And Abigail, you know me well. I'm very much the advocate for that necessary for some, useful for all piece of what we do, which is let everybody have access. And that's why we try and bring down that cost and do it on a domain level and encourage schools to use it. And I think that also means that you're not, the worst calls we get, and I've told you this loads of times before, Abigail, 2 days before the exam. Can we have a copy of Read and Write, please? And we really, 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 as
Need it
much as we
now.
can, say no, unless we know that that student has had access to it and it's just a glitch in the system somewhere and they need another copy. But yeah, that's the sort of cost that you would be into. So if you think about it, it's about £2 per pupil per year.
And I'm right in thinking that staff can also use it if you've got a school license. That's right, isn't
Yeah,
it?
everybody on the domain, and also you can actually use it on at home as well. So it means that if you've got a device, a limited number of devices, say in school, and you're using it, you'll want to give pupils access to it at home, and they can use it
Yeah.
on mum and dad's computer if they need, or their own device, or if they're maybe using a Windows device in school and they're not allowed to take it home, but they've got an iPad at home. Or they've just got their own phone, they can access all these tools as well. We find that great knock-on effect, particularly for families where literacy levels might not be as high at home as they are even at school, but also where English maybe isn't the first language
Yep.
at home. But yet pupils are coming home and they're needing support for their homework, but they can get access to these tools that'll help them with that literacy development as well. So I think it's a win-win all around. So you get up to basically 5 copies per student, basically, so they can use it in 5 different places. So on their phone, and their iPad, and their Chromebook, and at school.
Plenty of places. I was just thinking along the stuff side of thing, because if I go back 20 years ago, you hardly had any staff in school who were neurodivergent. You didn't have dyslexic
Yeah,
teachers as well. You probably did, but they
yeah,
probably kept it a secret. Whereas
yeah, yeah,
now
yeah.
we've got them being quite open about the fact I'm dyslexic, I struggle with this, and actually your tools really support them both with their teaching, with their planning, with but also demonstrating to students that actually it's okay to do this, it's okay to use this kind of technology, because they're going to go out into a
Totally.
workplace and they're going to be able to use it in the workplace, and it's okay because my teacher used to do that as well. And you guys very kindly lent me a coffee. You can lend me a coffee as well. Gave me I obviously need a coffee. You lent me a copy of it, and I used it. I was using it for the first year of my master's degree, and I was getting it
Mhm.
to read the documents out to me because, to be perfectly honest, staring at the page for too long was giving me a headache. So it was playing in the background. It was amazing. It was brilliant, and just helped me with that kind of thing. So useful for
Yeah,
adults as well as children.
no, totally. And we've got people that use Read and Write. We have outside of the work that I do and that you would know about, we have a whole division that we call Workplace internally here at Texthelp. But if you think about, like, it is everybody from a lot of the NHS trusts across England put it in place for their staff. It is like Coca-Cola have it, Amazon have it worldwide, EY have it, like big companies, small companies, and in between companies, and they're using it for staff because thankfully we have things like access to work here in the UK where
Yeah,
it's funded. It's not always coming out of the pockets of the employer, which just helps get it across the line. But you're entirely right. And DSA, a high volume, I think it's something like 80% of all DSA students qualify for a speech to, or sorry, a text to speech engine, and a lot of them use our stuff. And so you've got it right the way across the board. So it's not just about exams. And I find it really exciting to see teachers use it, because I think as text help, sometimes you forget, particularly with Read and Write, you're always focused on the students and pupil outcomes, and rightly so, and literacy and additional support and dyslexia and all of the things that we're here to support our students with. But you're right, seeing a teacher sort of grab a hold of it and use it to support themselves, perhaps with dyslexia, perhaps not, perhaps to support, but then they find all these other areas of, like, modeling pronunciation, or in secondary school for modern foreign languages, being able to model that and have a two-way chat. But also we've seen teachers use it now, Abigail, for taking like web pages. And we have done this long before AI was AI as it is, where you take a web page and simplify it down and reduce the reading level. Suddenly a teacher has notes from a particular topic that they haven't had to do much work for. So there are loads of things there that, from a workload or a productivity, as well as they just need a little bit of extra help and support. There's a lot less stigma around using these tools now, thankfully.
Absolutely, definitely. And you are right. It always was that stigma of, oh, I don't want to use that because I'm going to be different. Whereas actually, we can use it as a teaching tool and encourage students to use it, which then becomes part of normal way of working and then becomes part of exams, and everybody's happy. We all succeed. Um, the other thing I was going to pick up, oh, Gavin's pointing a finger at me.
No, I was just going to say that it continues their way from the education world into the work world because they can just carry it with them.
Absolutely.
Totally, yeah, yeah.
Independence. The other thing I was going to pick up on there is I've now completely forgotten it because Gavin's put me off my track. Thanks, Gavin. So, remember that when I worked with my students, the speech to text side of thing, and I know as SENCOs, they really struggle with this idea of lots of students talking into a microphone, having headphones on, all the rest of it. Yes, okay, this is a separate cost to the Texthelp products, but you can now get really good headsets, which are noise cancelling, so they can't hear everybody else talking around them. But you can also get some really good noise cancelling microphones that are attached to those, where they've not got to talk really loudly for it to
Yeah.
pick up the voices. And, okay, it's more expensive than the 99p ones that we buy off the market, but you can actually have several students in a classroom, and it's no more than a murmur, is it, Paddy? I'm sure you've got examples of schools that are doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right, that technology has changed dramatically. I think I alluded to it when we were talking earlier, just the complexity there used to be around dictation of training and training models. And I always thought it was bizarre on the training models that what you do is you get a pupil who might struggle to read and therefore they need speech dictate. And what do you need them to do? Read a massive complex paragraph. And it was just crazy. So I think yes, the cost has come down and lowered for those. But you know what I've also seen within that, simple things like particularly in secondary, we've all seen students run around with their AirPods and run around with their wired headphones, and they have exceptionally good microphones now. And the thing that I'm interested about in that, the teachers would argue with me because they'd be like, "Ah, Paddy, but we don't know if they're just listening to Spotify or are they actually." But the
They
thing
are.
is, I know, but if they can connect now with those or plug those directly in, suddenly you're looking at your friend who's sitting with his or her AirPods in, and you're not automatically going, "Oh, he's using that software or she's using that software." You don't care anymore because it's so. I think the access to those, a few years ago, nobody had microphones built into their headphones. It wasn't a thing. Mobile phones made that a thing, and so that's there. But I do think you're entirely right that in the classrooms that I've observed this in, I have seen really effective use of really good headsets where I'm like, my goodness, this is a fairly quiet classroom. And some of the kids are using text to speech, and some of them are not using anything, and some of them are using dictation. And that I think helps us with an exam hall environment stuff as well, because JCQ moving around saying actually we can cluster pupils together now. It's an interesting one for speech recognition, but you're right. It's. I think people think it's going to be a massive noise of 30 kids chattering really loudly, and actually, it's not.
No, absolutely. And I know that when it comes to the exams, people are thinking, oh, it's got to be separate rooming because of this. Actually, if you've got a humans need to be able to pick that sound up. So children do have to speak fairly loud for it.
Yeah,
Whereas actually with these headsets and the microphones, you can effectively get 4 children in the corners of the room and have only one invigilator in there. So
correct.
you've got
Yeah,
one person for 4 students as opposed to 5 adults for 4 students.
yeah,
Because if you've got your scribe with your student, you then also need an invigilator as well. So
correct.
you're definitely cutting down on. I know I keep talking about money because I know schools are struggling with it, but you're cutting down on those costs that are associated with that. But
Yeah, there are
also,
nice ways to scale it now. Yeah,
absolutely, but also we're not having to send the TA to the classroom with the child throughout their 5 years that we're building up to the GCSE because they've got their headset on. They can just do it themselves in the classroom without the adult being there.
yeah, and there's lots of other things that go on for companies like us that go on underneath the hood. Like we want to make these things as easy, as practical, as scalable as possible. But there's work that we do in the background as well, which nobody will ever see that benefits that. The like of, and I hate to bring these two letters into it again, but AI. The thing is that AI is getting so much better. Right, you haven't heard my dog bark once. He's barked twice whenever I've been talking today, but that's because the microphone that I'm on is blocking out everything, and I'm just in an open room here. But the same thing is happening on our speech dictation, where we're making sure that actually we increase the accuracy, particularly when a pupil might be struggling in any particular way of speaking into the microphone. That we're figuring that out a little bit better, and we're blocking out the background distractions too. So lots of tech being involved there to try and make this a confident, happy place for a student to have access arrangements when they're using technology.
Definitely. So, Paddy, that was amazing. You've talked us through all of your products. We know that they're definitely the best thing to buy to get our students independent, and independence is, my big buzzword. They've got to be independent. I am going to say, because we know that we have lots of questions in the group about access arrangements. JCQ change those arrangements every year, so August they will get changed again, new ones will come out. I think there's going to be some interesting ones in this next update, so look out for our webinar that we do with Nick, which is in November again.
First week of December.
Oh, December. There you go. First week of December, which I'm sure Paddy will come and join us as well for that one.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So Nick Late is chief over at JCQ, and he will give us an update on those new guidance. But also, please make sure you have read that JCQ guidance really carefully and download. So there is a book you can buy called Assessing the Need for Access Arrangements in Examinations, a Practical Guide. It's a really thick green book. It's a bit like buying the yellow pages again, but actually it's really good. You can see all my post-it notes that are stuck on there. It's a really useful one to sit alongside the JCQ guidance, because it gives you lots of examples of what you can do and what you can't do, and the evidence that you need and the evidence that you don't need as well. And it takes you through some quite complicated scenarios sometimes where you've got a child who doesn't fit the box in a straightforward manner, and I happen to know that Texthelp is one of the recommended products at the back of it, so there you go, Paddy. If you didn't know that, you're advertising somebody else's book.
I didn't know that. And is that, Abigail, is that updated in line with the access arrangements guidelines annually then? Yeah.
So this is version 7. It was the one that came out just after the last set, so it comes out usually about a month, perhaps 6 weeks after the new guidance. But also on the JCQ website there are some crib sheets. What I would say to people is go and grab these. I've printed mine out just so I can hold them up to the screen. You've got one about computer readers and readers, and it makes it really clear about who you can use them for. Sorry, dear. One about 25% extra time, so how you actually do your extra time. One about scribe and speech recognition technology. And as Paddy points out, you can use the reader, the computer reader, in an English exam. You can't use a human in an English exam. So I think that's really key for a lot of our students. But there is also one that says overview of evidence requirements. It's a double-sided one. And this one, to me, is the most useful piece of paper when somebody asks a question in the group and I'm thinking, I'm sure I know the answer to that, but I just need to double check. Is this double-sided piece of paper is my lifesaver, because it's got pretty much everything you need on that one. So do go and download those as well. And go and look at Paddy's website to go and find out which ones you can get your PDF versions of the exam paper for. Gavin's about to speak.
And you can also download the JCQ stuff from our website directly as well.
Oh, okay.
On the resource section.
A link to JCQ. I'll be looking.
Perfect.
Paddy.
No, good advice. I love those crib sheets. Actually, those are. I think those were only new this year, or maybe last year. I've lost track, but they're just really useful. Just one pagers. You're entirely right, and that's what we have tried to do. One of the things that we always found we got a lot of questions on was, I have your computer reader. Well, where do I get the PDFs from? Because there's like a missing link there, because and that's why we've produced our one pager that goes right for each. But I would caution, exactly as you have done, Abigail, these things change regularly. And the exam boards obviously try and do it once a year as well, but it's really, really important that you keep on top of the information there. And I know your webinars are superb at doing that, particularly one with Nick in the middle of the year. Towards the end of the year. Really, really good.
Nick in December, and if anybody's interested, I'm actually delivering access arrangements training in October. So look out for that one. You'll see it advertised on the Sensible SENCO website as well. And Paddy, you can come and join me for that one as well.
I was surprised that it's not sponsored by Texthelp, Abigail. What's that about?
Hey, you got mentioned in the last one, so it may well be.
For Westminster Insight.
Yeah, it's on behalf of Westminster Insight, so I will be advertising that one a little bit later on. It's not one that we're running, it's actually an accredited course for people, so yeah. Anyway, Paddy, anything else you want to add before we let you escape? And it's just started raining here.
No, just to say, do get along to that webpage that you've talked about there, Abigail. And you can, any of these tools, I understand that when you're thinking about making a change from human readers and scribes, there's a bit of, oh, what's my IT department going to say? As my, as a SENCO, I'm on board, but as my exam officer on board, there's all of these questions. You can try any one of these tools, and you can try them for a month. You can have a look at it, and you can assess exactly how they fit in. If you're thinking and you've got Chromebooks, I would advise you just to reach out and contact me directly on the details that hopefully we'll share after this, Abigail. Just because Chromebooks a whole, it does lots of stuff, and we want to take you through that, show you that. But of course, anybody can have access to any of our tools anytime they need for a trial. And we'll look after people, Abigail, for sure.
You do look after people. You always look after people. So thank you very much, Paddy, for today's session. And everybody, we look forward to seeing you in the future. I'm just going to wave at everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Very good.